The first thing everyone noticed wasn't the silence. It was the laughter. It echoed across the spotless production floor of Alderon Dynamics, one of the largest advanced manufacturing companies in the Midwest. Engineers stopped typing. Supervisors glanced over safety rails. Executives smiled politely as their CEO crouched beside an old, rusted metal toolbox. "This," she laughed, pointing with the toe of her polished shoe. "These belong in a museum." Several people chuckled. A few looked uncomfortable. The man kneeling beside the toolbox didn't laugh. He simply wiped his hands on a faded work towel, closed the dented lid, and quietly said, "They've never let me down." No one in that room realized that within 48 hours, those battered tools would become the most valuable objects inside a $2 billion factory. Marcus Reed had never cared what people thought about his toolbox. He cared about whether it worked. The heavy steel box had belonged to his father, a diesel mechanic in rural Ohio who believed every tool should earn its scratches honestly. When Marcus was 12, he'd spent entire summers handing wrenches across grease-covered engines while his father patiently explained why machines talked long before they failed. "You don't fix equipment," his dad used to say. "You listen to it." Marcus never forgot that lesson. Years later, after losing his wife, Emily, to a sudden illness, he became a full-time single father to his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Life became measured differently. School lunches, homework, soccer practices, night shifts, birthday cakes baked at midnight because buying one wasn't in the budget. He wasn't chasing promotions anymore. He was chasing stability. Every overtime shift meant another month of piano lessons for Lily. Every repaired machine meant another bill paid. His toolbox looked ancient. His priorities were not. Across town, Victoria Lawson was preparing for the biggest week in Alderon Dynamics history. At only 42, she'd built a reputation as one of the youngest CEOs in industrial manufacturing. Smart. Driven. Fearlessly ambitious. Under her leadership, the company had invested hundreds of millions into artificial intelligence, predictive automation, and fully integrated robotics. Business magazines called her the future of American manufacturing. She secretly hoped they were right. Because in 3 days, investors from around the world would arrive to witness the launch of Alderon's newest automated production campus. A project worth nearly $2 billion. Everything had to be perfect. Everything. Marcus had been hired only 6 months earlier. Officially, he was a maintenance technician. Unofficially, people kept calling him whenever nobody else could solve a problem. He never bragged. Never argued. Never made anyone feel foolish. He simply listened. To motors. To pumps. To conveyors. To people. Sometimes those required the same skill. The morning of the executive tour began smoothly. Victoria walked confidently through the factory with investors, architects, software engineers, and department heads. Every screen glowed. Every robot moved in synchronized precision. Every presentation landed exactly as rehearsed. Then she noticed Marcus. He was replacing bearings on an older support conveyor tucked away behind the new production line. His toolbox sat open nearby. Rust freckles covered the hinges. Several handles had been wrapped in electrical tape. One wrench had initials carved into it. Victoria stopped. "What happened to your equipment budget?" The maintenance supervisor smiled nervously. "Oh. Marcus prefers using his own tools." Victoria frowned. "Those?" Marcus looked up politely. "They fit my hands." She laughed. Not cruelly. Just confidently. "Those tools look older than half this building." Several executives smiled. One investor took a picture. Victoria shook her head. We've spent $2 billion modernizing this facility, and our maintenance team still carries antiques. Marcus answered softly. Sometimes older tools teach you patience. She smiled politely. Or maybe it's time to upgrade. Without another word, the group continued walking. Marcus simply picked up the wrench she'd mocked and finished tightening the final bolt. That evening Lily noticed something unusual. Her father barely touched dinner. "You okay?" Marcus smiled. "Long day." They laughed again. He paused. Children noticed everything. Just a misunderstanding. Lily reached across the table. Grandpa's tools still fix things. Marcus smiled wider. They sure do. 40 hours later. Everything stopped. Literally. At 9:17 a.m., the primary automated assembly network froze. Robotic arms halted mid-motion. Conveyor systems locked. Laser calibration stations shut down. Emergency alerts echoed through every production hall. Millions of dollars per hour. Gone. Engineers sprinted toward control rooms. Software specialists searched code. Automation vendors joined emergency video calls from 3 different countries. No answers. Victoria stood in the operations center watching production numbers fall toward zero. What's happening? No one knew. Hours passed. Nothing. The problem wasn't obvious. Which made it dangerous. Thousands of sensors all reported normal. Power remained stable. Network diagnostics looked clean. The software insisted everything should be working. Reality disagreed. Outside the control room, Marcus quietly watched maintenance crews replacing perfectly healthy components. He finally asked, "Has anyone actually listened to line 4? An engineer blinked. "What?" "The conveyor. It's offline." "I know." Marcus tilted his head. "It stopped making a sound yesterday." Several engineers exchanged puzzled looks. "It isn't making any sound now." Marcus nodded. "Exactly." The room went quiet. He explained. Every conveyor has a vibration pattern. Yesterday, one section became quieter. Not louder. Quieter. Something stopped absorbing vibration. Most people stared blankly. Victoria crossed her arms. "What does that mean?" Marcus answered carefully. "It means something mechanical failed before the sensors knew how to measure it." She hesitated. "Can you prove it?" "I think so." He walked toward the disabled production line carrying that same rusty toolbox. Not because the tools were magical. Because he knew exactly where every single one was. Without looking. Years of habit. He removed a small inspection cover most technicians hadn't even noticed. Then he lay flat on the concrete floor. Everyone watched. He closed his eyes. Placed one hand against the steel housing. And waited. Nearly a minute passed. Finally he whispered. "There." He pointed toward a hidden coupling buried beneath 3 automated systems. Engineers dismantled the assembly. At first. Nothing. Then one young technician stopped. "Wait." Inside the coupling sat a hairline fracture no wider than a sheet of paper. Under normal load, it barely shifted. Under synchronized production speeds, it flexed just enough to throw dozens of downstream systems out of alignment. Every sensor individually stayed within acceptable limits. Collectively, the entire factory shut itself down. The replacement part took 20 minutes. Restarting the facility took another 30. Production resumed. Applause erupted across the control room. Not because a machine worked. Because 2,000 employees could breathe again. Victoria didn't clap. She simply watched Marcus quietly placing every wrench back into the old toolbox. The same toolbox she'd laughed at. That evening she found him eating lunch alone outside near the employee garden. She walked over carrying 2 coffees. "Mind if I sit?" Marcus smiled. "Of course." For several moments neither spoke. Finally Victoria sighed. "I owe you an apology." Marcus looked surprised. "You don't owe me anything." I laughed. "You did. I judged you. You judged the toolbox." She smiled faintly. "I suppose I did." Marcus looked across the parking lot where workers headed home. "My dad always said people confuse appearance with usefulness." She nodded. "I think I've been doing that more often than I'd like to admit." She asked him something no CEO had ever asked him before. "How did you know?" Marcus thought for a long moment. "I didn't. I noticed something different. Then I trusted experience enough to investigate." She leaned back. "None of our software caught it. It wasn't supposed to. The software measures numbers. You were measuring." He smiled. Curiosity. That conversation changed more than either of them expected. Victoria began spending one afternoon every month working alongside employees from different departments. No speeches. No cameras. No executives following behind. She simply listened. Warehouse workers suggested safer loading procedures. Custodians proposed easier cleaning schedules that reduced equipment downtime. Receptionists shared ideas that improved visitor logistics. Forklift operators redesigned traffic flow. Some of the company's best improvements came from people who had never attended a board meeting. Marcus never asked for recognition. Instead, he requested something unexpected. "If the company has money for new toolboxes." Victoria smiled. "You want one?" "No. I'd rather we create apprenticeships." She raised an eyebrow. "We're losing experienced tradespeople. Young people think skilled trades don't matter anymore." They do. They just need someone willing to teach." Victoria stared at him. The request wasn't about him. It was about everyone coming after him. Within a year, Alderaan launched the Reed Apprenticeship Initiative. Veteran mechanics paired with recent high school graduates. Retired technicians returned as mentors. Experienced workers documented knowledge that had previously existed only in memory. How machines sounded. How bearings smelled before overheating. How vibration felt through steel. Things impossible to learn from instruction manuals alone. The program became one of the company's greatest strengths. Turnover dropped. Safety improved. Innovation increased. Not because technology became less important, but because people became more valued. Lily noticed the biggest change. Her father came home smiling more often. One afternoon she visited the factory during family day. Victoria personally greeted her. "So you're Lily." The little girl nodded. "You saved my daddy's toolbox." Victoria laughed. "I think your daddy's toolbox saved all of us." Lily grinned proudly. "I knew it would." Near the factory entrance now sits a glass display. Visitors often assume it contains an expensive prototype. Instead, inside rests an old steel toolbox. Scratched. Rusty. Worn smooth by decades of honest work. Beside it is a simple plaque. It doesn't mention billion-dollar production numbers. It doesn't list profits. It doesn't celebrate technology. It reads, "Innovation begins with respect. Never overlook the hands that keep great things moving." Employees pass it every day. Some smile. Some stop to read. Many remember. Marcus still uses those same tools. Not because he can't afford new ones. The company offered him dozens of replacements. He politely declined. Each scratch reminds him of his father. Each dent reminds him of problems solved patiently. Each worn handle reminds him that value isn't measured by appearance. It's measured by purpose. As for Victoria, she often tells new managers a story during leadership orientation. She never starts with the factory shutdown. She starts with a mistake. My biggest leadership lesson, she says, wasn't learning to trust machines. It was learning not to underestimate people. Because the easiest thing in the world is to judge someone by what they carry. The harder, and far more rewarding, choice is to discover what they carry inside. Sometimes wisdom arrives wearing an expensive suit. Sometimes it arrives carrying a rusty toolbox. And when we choose respect over assumptions, kindness over pride, and curiosity over quick judgment, we create something stronger than any machine could ever build. Not just successful companies. Better communities. Better families. And better versions of ourselves. If this story touched your heart, remember this simple truth: never measure someone's worth by what they own. The quietest person in the room may be carrying the experience, resilience, and kindness that everyone else will one day depend on.